everybody, my name is Stacy Fisher and I am the manager at Garden Gate Flowers located at 3002 Lafayette here in Midtown St. Joseph. Thank you so much for watching our DIY video on best tips for designing flowers. And if you haven't come to visit us, we would love to see you. We have a little boutique here as well, not just flowers. So we are kind of a one-stop shop for all things awesome and beautiful. So please come see us. We'd love to have some visitors. Okay, so we wanted to share some of our fun flower secrets with you guys today. So I picked a glass vase because this is probably what you're most likely using if you're working on some flowers at home. And by the way, if you ever want to just come and buy stems of flowers from us, that's not a problem. We don't have to design them for you. You can just, buy some stems or wrap them up and you can take them home and have a fun little DIY project on your own. So the first tip would be to always make sure that you start with a clean vase. And if you're using any sort of filler, make sure they're clean as well. We like to use stones or maybe marbles in the bottom of your vase. We just put a thin layer on the bottom and it adds a really pretty motif, but also it also has a way of securing your flower stems in the bottom. So it looks pretty and has a function as well. You really don't need too terribly many. And then the next tip is to make sure that your water is full enough, but not too full. We always kind of have this bad habit of putting too much water in, and then when your flowers go in, it displaces the water and it goes all over your sink. So you could easily put more water into the end. So if you put in too little, that's okay. We'll just, grab a watering can and fill it up at the end. So that's a good way of not making a huge mess when you're working on your flowers. So if you were designing flowers here at Garden Gate, I would always start with your greenery. The greenery is kind of the hidden jewel, I think, of a flower arrangement. If you do it well, everything else kind of falls into place. Now, if you've ever been to Garden Gate, then you've probably met our store creator, Karen Beatty. She started our store over 20 years ago, and she's definitely the flower guru. And she taught all of us that if you green your vase well and one of your flowers dies, you're not going to notice very much because you greened it in so well. It's like its own arrangement without flowers. It's beautiful on its own. So that is what we always strive to do here at Garden Gate. So today I'm going to use a greenery called Floral. It's also called lemon leaf. So it's a very nice waxy green, wide leaved greenery. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I cut my stem to allow water to run freely through that stem. That opens it up. And then I'm going to strip all of the extra leaves off the bottom. Did you see what I did there? That's important because you don't want any of your greenery to actually touch the water because that causes bacteria growth in the water. So I always like to keep my greenery, well, you can do a tall or a low, but in this case I'm going to do a low green, and I'm going to design this in a design that I call a roundy moundy, which means we're going to make it 360, so you can put it in the center of a table, could act as a centerpiece. So you want it to look pretty all the way around. If you don't have enough greenery or enough flowers to make something 360, you can do a one-sided arrangement and bring up the greenery tall in the back, so it definitely has a very definite front and a definite back type of arrangement. So neither way is right or wrong, but those are two different options. So you need to make that decision before you get started. But today I think we're going to do, like I said, a 360 roundy moundy. I'm going to cut my greens and strip off all those extra greens at the bottom so they don't sit in the water. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to place these in a way that the stems are angled. So see, they're sticking into my rocks, and also the stems are crisscrossed. Can you see that? If we keep putting them in a crisscross pattern, that will create a grid inside of the vase that will allow the stems of the actual flowers to sit more securely. If you also have a little bad spot on your leaf, you can either cut it off, or you could take a really sharp pair of scissors and you can give it a little bit of a haircut. I'm just going to cut this little bit of green part off right here at an angle, and now you can't tell. All right, so I'm going to cut the bottom off. Again, I'm going to crisscross the greenery here. I'm going to keep going with that until I have a nice firm base. If you have some yuckies on the end, you can pick those off as well. So crisscross pattern. And then for myself, I don't just put the greenery on the outside, I put it through the middle as well, because I think it has a nice texture at the end if your greenery is sticking up through your flowers. You know, that's a total design choice. If you would prefer just a mound of flowers in the middle without the greenery sticking out, you can do that as well, but that's definitely something that we do here. All right, so I'm gonna continue with this crisscrossing fashion. And see, we lined the outside and then went back in the middle and filled that middle part. All right, so in order to make that greenery super interesting, I think it's a good idea to add a mixed, more than one type of green. So I started with Floral. I'm gonna add a little bit of Pittosporum, and I'm also gonna add some eucalyptus. So the eucalyptus has a, not a shiny leaf, it's a real dull matte leaf and it's a different color. So we're gonna add these as a bit of an accent. I talked about texture earlier, and a good way of adding texture, which adds a lot of interest to your arrangement, is by using a mixed green. If you ever get an arrangement where there's just one type of greenery in it, you'll notice right away after watching this video if they didn't do that, because it really does add a lot of extra interest. So we're going to go forth and continue to fill in the holes that I have here to create that nice solid grid for our greenery at the bottom with the rest of this eucalyptus. Now this is a really interesting piece of eucalyptus. This is called guneye euc. There's a lot of different types of eucalyptus. One of my favorite is Silver Dollar. It's a nice big circular leaf. This one has a nice linear long leaf that adds a really nice wavy, almost bohemian look. I use this in a lot of wedding bouquets to give it a lot of flow and to drape those flowers out down in front of that beautiful wedding dress. So if you're looking for something that is really flowy, maybe you are helping somebody with a wedding bouquet, this is a really nice accent greenery to use. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna fill in the rest of these little holes here. I'm going to make sure that those leaves, once again, are not sitting in the water. So I'm gonna strip off the bottom. We're gonna make a nice solid grid. All right, so it looks like we have a nice solid foundation. So see how pretty that is even without your flowers? That's what we were going for. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to add my focal flowers. So in this case, I'm going to use roses. Hopefully you already know this tip, but if it has thorns on it, it's always a good idea to take a paring knife or something similar and to gently remove all the thorns, because nobody wants a thorny rose in their arrangement. Also, in this case, this rose is pretty nice, but once in a blue moon, you'll have what they call guard petals on the not in a blue moon, this is always, there's guard petals on the outside of a rose, and they're the ones that are a little darker in color or have a little bit of a bruising. You can just remove those really easily, and then it reveals the beautiful untouched petals beneath. So this will allow your arrangement to look nicer longer. And as your arrangement is growing older, you can take off those guard petals to keep it looking fresher longer. So really that's a tip that we all use when we here in the shop take flowers home. All right, so when you're cutting this, you want to measure twice and cut once, as they say. So I normally pull my arrangement close to the edge of the table to measure how far down I want to cut my stem. So I want this to be more towards the middle. It's going to be that focal point. So I'm going to cut right about here. And you're going to cut at an angle because that allows for more water to reach, to go up to the stem. It has a larger surface area. So always cut them at an angle. Also, it allows for there to be a point, so it allows to poke through the middle of that greenery a lot more easily. So I think I'm going to put this right here in the middle, but I think that might be too tall. So I'm going to take that out, cut it again, put that right there in the middle. And because of that crisscross pattern, see how it's standing perfectly? That's because we created that really firm grid. All right, let's do this again. I think this will work this time. All righty, there we go, perfect. So now I wanted to add some complementary colors. So in this case, I'm gonna use a cremone, which is a type of mum. I'm gonna strip all those extra leaves off, cut the bottom, And now I am going to put this around the outside. Now I'm doing this backwards, so there we go. And then I'm going to use another rose. This is actually a dark pink. Kind of looks red there in the film, but it's a dark pink. You can cut it at an angle. And we're going to rotate these so we can make sure it looks good on all three sides. Remember, we're doing a 360 arrangement. And then I brought in some, another type of flower that I hope everybody recognizes. This is a carnation. Carnations often get a very bad rap because they are, in the flower world, more on the low end price-wise. But that is a great way to add a pop of color to an arrangement where maybe your budget is a little bit smaller. And we can add it as an accent. So this is a gorgeous fuchsia color, which is a natural color. I did not dye it, I never dye any flowers here. But it's not quite open. So with a carnation, they're very hardy. They'll last a long time, but you can just use your thumbs and massage the petals a little bit, and it'll be a lot more open. So I am going to now place this on the back side because I wanted this to be a less expensive arrangement. So I'm going to use that carnation for that pop of color. And we're going to also use it to fill in this space. Okay, so at the end, I'm going to add some accents. This is a Matsumoto flower. Again, strip that out. I want to add a little height, so I'm going to make these a little bit longer. Now, something that I don't do with a 360 arrangement as I would do with a one-sided arrangement is to add a nice line flower. And by line flower, I mean nice and tall. It creates a line with your eye that starts up and moves down. So a lot of times you'll see arrangements with stalk or perhaps a snapdragon, and that's why that's called a line flower, because it's this nice long line that draws either your site down or up. So this could be used in a similar fashion. If I hadn't cut it low, I could have had a sprig sticking up, but this is going to be a 360, so I'm going to add it around the edges to kind of fill in any holes that I may see. And then the final step would be your accent flowers. So in this case, I'm going to use something called Solidago, a nice fluffy yellow flower. People also use things like baby's breath perhaps, or wax flower. There's a lot of great ways to fill in the holes. This goes a long way. So this stem for us would be $3, but I'm going to be able to use this in my entire arrangement. Again, another cost-cutting measure to make your arrangement look fuller. So this has a lot of different shoots. So I'm going to not just stick this whole thing in here. I'm going to cut off all the shoots and stick them in individually. So it's going to go a lot further. Make sure you strip all of that extra greenery off. And then again, I'm just going to spin it. If you have like a Lazy Susan at home, you could use that Lazy Susan to allow yourself to spin it more freely. Our tables are nice and slick because we do so many arrangements in a day, but if you're at home, that's definitely something I've done before, and it does allow you to easily just spin it really easily. Little trick. I saw that on a YouTube video one time that I was watching a gal do that I follow, actually on Instagram, I guess, and I thought, that is a brilliant idea. So I wanted to share that tip as well. Now, if things aren't sticking in quite the way you want, just push that greenery in a little further. And we're just going to finish this guy up with this Solidago. Let's see here. I'm going to take off these extra little side pieces because I don't want that in my water. And then I'll add these on the sides. Now, if you do have any ugly stems showing on the side, I always say make sure that you cover up all your mechanics. So I have a few pieces of greenery that are kind of sticking out at an odd angle. So I'm going to use this filler flower to cover those up. And if you happen to use any sort of tape or anything, this is a good way to cover that up as well. Okay, so there's my final piece. Very bohemian. I have a little piece kind of sticking out funny over here. There we go. Super cute. And then in our case, the finishing touch for us would be a product called Crowning Glory. There's a lot of different brands, but that's one we happen to use. And basically it's a type of floral glue. That's what I like to call it anyway. But it's a preservative. It keeps your blooms from opening up too fast, too soon. So you're just gonna spray it, and that's gonna help keep it fresher longer. Now the final little piece of information we all want, I get phone calls about it almost every day, is I got this pretty arrangement. Now what do I do? How do I keep it alive? Okay, here's the trick. Every 3 days, go to a sink, kind of hold it and tip it to its side and pour out the old water and put in new water. Because even though we took a lot of care to make sure no bacterial growth would go in that water, there's always going to be a little bit. So that's going to keep that bacterial growth down. It's going to keep your flowers fresher longer. And if you're really, really adventurous, you could take each bloom out and recut the bottoms and replace them, and that's going to reopen the bottoms to allow the water intake again. So again, that'll keep it looking fresher longer. Also, if it's the winter time, make sure you don't place that thing under a heater vent. That is very bad for your flowers. And these are pet flowers. They're not growing out of the ground. So a lot of direct sunlight is not super good for them either for longevity purposes. So keep that in mind as well. All right, guys, thank you so much. I hope these DIY tips were helpful, and I hope that you all have fun creating more beautiful flowers out there on your own. Thanks, and have a great day.